Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's RightCrowd webinar. This session will be recorded. We expect to have time for questions at the end. If you have questions for the presenters, please enter them in the GoToWebinar control box under the Questions tab. All submitted questions will also be forwarded to the presenters for follow-up. We have a full roster of presenters today, so I'll introduce them at the start of each section. We'll begin with a company overview presented by Peter Hill, CEO, Brian McElravy, President and COO, and James Stewart, CFO. And now I'll invite Peter to begin the session.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm Peter Hill, founder and CEO of RightCrowd. We're going to start the webinar with a company overview and then delve into the RightCrowd products. I'm joined today by with James Stewart and Brian McElravy. And we're going to start by going through how do we actually get to RightCrowd? Well, it all started back in 2004. We started by helping large enterprises ensure that the right people are in the right place at the right time. Hence, that's why our company is actually called RightCrowd. Access to buildings and facilities is controlled by physical access control systems, which are supplied by large industrial technology companies such as Honeywell, Johnson Controls, and Carrier. And RightCrowd has an enterprise software platform that makes these systems much smarter and more automated, and has proven with deployments at some of the largest companies in the world. RightCrowd's also continuing to innovate and now has the ability to manage the presence of people through the use of security wearables, and also has the ability to quickly identify any system access compliance issues with our new award-winning product, RightCrowd Access Analytics. You can see our mission statement there surrounds the fact that we're trying to manage the access and presence of people. And just a little more information about our organization today. We're in excess of 150 people. We actually have a number of offices scattered throughout the world. We're obviously based as an Australian business with significant offices sitting in Seattle, Toronto, Europe, and the Philippines. And you can see we've got currently 7 of the largest companies using our platform at global scale. And we expect to continue to drive that innovation into the security industry over the next few years. I'd like to hand over to Brian McElravy, President and CEO of RightCrowd.
Thanks, Peter. As Peter mentioned, I am Brian McElravy. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at RightCrowd. I've been with RightCrowd for just under a year, but I've been in the physical security industry for over 25 years, and in particular, security technology and software for a little over 20. Peter, you want to go to the next slide quickly here? So today what I want to do is introduce you to some of the terms and concepts you're going to hear and learn about in this session today. And we'll tell you a bit about the big secret. And the big secret is us, RightCrowd. As Peter mentioned, for over 17 years, we've been managing the access of some of the largest enterprise companies in the world. That includes manufacturing companies, shipping, fulfillment centers, financial institutions, technology companies, and more, and they rely on us to help manage their enterprise access. Now, notice I said manage access, not control access. Access control is the card and the reader. Access management is the intelligence that we put on top of the card that determines who, what, where, when, and how access is requested and granted across an enterprise. To simplify the mission statement Peter gave just now, at RightCrowd, our mission is very simple: ensure everyone on site is right. So that's ensuring every employee, every contractor, or visitor has the right authorizations to access your physical sites, and to ensure your physical access control system remains in sync with your other business systems that track and manage your identities. Our vision is to manage access chaos. So here's a new term you might not have heard. And what is access chaos? So in today's world where we have hybrid workforces, we have work from anywhere and the Great Resignation, that causes a flux of levers, movers, and joiners throughout a company. And it therefore also causes a large amount of access control transactions throughout a period of time within enterprise corporations. Our research shows almost 99% of all PACS systems contain out-of-date or out-of-sync data from these transactions, and that leads to hundreds and sometimes thousands of identities with unauthorized access or incorrect privileges. Now, this obviously causes significant insider threat, and that to me is one of the top risks that companies face today. As you'll see today, to manage access chaos, we help you map, measure, and monitor all your identities that are tied to your PACS system and other business systems in order to help identify and manage your access-based risks. To automate and enforce access management rules that you have in place, you'll hear more detail in this video on attribute-based access management. Essentially, you start with an access card with little or no rights. Based on certain attributes and conditions, as well as rules and workflows that are met, access is either granted or not. So we've always called it attribute-based access management. And with our workforce access engine, we've been doing this successfully for over 17 years. Now today, some people might equate the term attribute-based access management with zero trust physical access. No matter what you call it, it means we help manage access. We don't just control it. We've been doing successfully for a very long time. Access management is mission critical to the top enterprise companies in the world to protect against access-based and insider threats. And their goal is very, very simple. Make sure everyone on site is right. And that's our goal as well. So I hope today you enjoy hearing more about our product line, our company, and how we can help you manage access chaos. From here, I'm going to pass it over to our CFO, James Stewart.
Thank you, BMAC, and thank you, Peter. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to introduce myself firstly. So James Stewart, I'm the Chief Financial Officer at RightCrowd. I've been at RightCrowd about 3 years now. Prior to that, I had a number of CFO roles in the financial services industry, and I also ran a couple of enterprise sales businesses or enterprise software businesses across the Asian market. Very excited to be working at RightCrowd. We've got a fantastic story which we're obviously taking you through today. I'd like to just have a little look at the financials. So if you see here on the next slide, you can see that we've actually grown as a company from listing in 2017 right through to FY22 very, very quickly. So our compound annual growth rate for our annual recurring revenue is at 38% per year. And our compound annual sales revenue growth rate is at 29%. So we've got a fantastic growth story. We're looking to continue that momentum. So FY23 is shaping up very strongly, a good pipeline, starting to execute on that. If you look at our regional split, it's also very healthy. We have a very, very strong market in North America. North America makes up over 60% of our revenue. And with headquarters in Australia, we obviously have a number of very, very strong enterprise clients in that market too. We've got operations in Europe, and we're growing that part of the business as well. So we've got plenty of areas of growth in other markets too. It's a very brief overview. I appreciate that. There's further information available to those that are interested. We are an ASX listed company, so we publish all our information on the market, but hopefully that gives you some insight into our business. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next section is an overview of the product strategy. This section will be presented by Bart Van Sevenant, Chief Product Officer, and Brian Jones, Chief Technology Officer. Brian, the floor is yours.
Hey, so Bart, RightCrowd's been in the physical access control industry for almost 18 years now. Looking at the industry, how well or how bad is the state of it, and what's the state of the industry according to you?
That's a great and a loaded question, Brian. So let me give my perspective on that. So I think there have been some good advancements over the last couple of years. We've seen smart cards becoming more secure. We've seen sort of the creation of mobile credentials and the use of them. So there's definitely some good things. But at the same time, from a RightCrowd perspective, one major observation from our end is that the essence of what physical access control is all about, that is like literally determining, do I grant or revoke access to someone that tries to enter one of our facilities, that has not changed. And what we think is problematic still in our space is the fact that the way how we sort of manage that, how we determine whether or not someone can enter a place is still very static in nature. We almost like predefine John has access to the data center. In addition to that, we see that physical access control systems are still very much isolated systems. They're not connected to other IT and business systems. And the combination of those two, in our view, is problematic. And why is that? If you look at today's reality, all organizations are confronted with hybrid working. You have an increasing number of safety requirements, health requirements, security requirements, and all of those literally create a necessity to look at access control in a much more dynamic way than that. And the net result of all of that is, and we see it over and over again, is what we like to refer to as access scales. And what is access scales is very simple. If I take the physical access control system, I open up the hood and I look at what are the identities, the so-called card holders that I see, what are the access rights that I have, and I would then compare it to, let's have a look at the HR system, let's have a look at the contractor management system. You would see a big difference, a delta between the numbers don't match up, the identities themselves don't match up, the access rights have accumulated over time, etc. So that's really problematic. And what we think needs to happen is something that is very similar to what we saw in the logical access control space over the last 2 decades. If you go back in time, in logical access control, up until about 2 decades ago, access control was similar to what we see in physical access control. The access itself was baked into the applications fairly statically. And in the logical access control space, we've seen this evolution first towards role-based access control in the late 90s. And then about a decade ago, we moved into what is known as attribute-based access control. And we believe we need to go through a similar sort of evolution in the physical access control space. Now, why is that? And briefly explaining what is attribute-based access control, because we're talking about a concept, but not necessarily everyone will be familiar with it. Attribute-based access control literally means that you take policies, and the policies are defining whether or not a person at a certain point in time will get access. So if we take an example, in traditional physical access control, we say John has access to the data center. If you translate that into attribute-based access control, you're going to say, depending on your role, depending on the time of the day, depending on trainings you went through, depending on certifications you may have, all of these are examples of attributes. Based on those attributes, I'm going to define a policy. As an example, access to the data center is going to be granted only to people that are part of the IT organization, are still an active employee, have gone through these 3 trainings, and hold this particular certificate. So you literally dynamically sort of use access control policies rather than statically predefined. Now, question for you, Brian. You've been working prior to joining RightCrowd last year. You've been working at large physical access control vendors. And I've often wondered, like, why have those vendors not made that move towards physical attribute-based access control in the past? Why is that?
Yeah, it's a great question, but I think fundamentally these companies, they make their money by selling readers, controllers, and by selling cards. And the software that kind of sits above that is pretty simple. There's an old adage that locks keep honest people out, and I would say the vast majority of the physical access software is literally, should this person have access to this door? And the more advanced ones, should they have access at this time? Even more advanced, are they allowed in on holidays? And that's 3 very simple attributes. They don't go to the state of, have they had this training? Have they worked too many hours? Have they been around this person? And so forth. So in many ways, I think the traditional industry sees software as a necessary evil, whereas we could take COVID as an example. Like, being able to get into a building only if you were vaccinated was very hard for them to implement. And that's just one attribute. And we can think of, hundreds and hundreds of business rules that could implement.
Yeah.
So But maybe back to RightCrowd. Can you explain in a few minutes some of our offerings and how we solve some of these problems?
Yeah, sure. So at RightCrowd, we have a product portfolio that has been structured really around steps. How do you, as an organization, if you want to move towards this attribute-based access control concept that we spoke about, what are the steps you go through? And our product portfolio is really mapped to those steps. So the first product we have like maps to the first thing you would naturally do. It's a product called RightCrowd Access Analytics, and it's all about identifying and quantifying that access chaos problem that I mentioned earlier on. And think of almost sort of mimicking or sort of testing out attribute-based access control without already having it implemented. So what the product allows you to do is literally say, like, if I would have attribute-based access control, I would, for example, use that policy saying you can only get into the data center if you are an IT person, if you've met these trainings, etc. And what the product allows you to do is to literally run that simulation and say, according to your attributes-based policy, here's the people that would be able to get into the data center. And this is how it compares to your current as-is situation based on your existing static physical access control system. Here's the people that actually can get into the data center, and here's the delta. So it literally allows you to make that step, get familiar with what attribute-based access control is all about. Then we move into our next two products called RightCrowd Workforce Access and RightCrowd Visitor Management. And those products are all about the actual implementation of attribute-based access control. So think of those products as a software platform, a layer that you put on top of your existing physical access control. And it really allows you to start defining those policies that we spoke about. So policies in the form of rules or workflows that are going to implement and enforce that attribute-based access control that we spoke about. So that's where you can say, I want access to the data center to be given to people that, and then you have all of those attributes, and it will actually on the fly enforce that into your existing attribute, in your existing physical access control system. And then we have our last product line called RightCrowd Presence Control, and that one is all about enforcement, really enforcing attribute-based physical access control. Imagine, I'll make the comparison, with a traditional access control system, you would badge at the data center, open the door, someone else may walk into the data center with you. We're now like in the data center with a bunch of people. I look around, but I have no idea, do these people actually meet all of those requirements that we spoke about? With presence control, we can literally enforce that. So you look around, and by using what we call security wearables, so digital badge holders that you're wearing as a person, you can literally look around, and by means of a collar, but we also do that digitally, by means of a collar, I can literally look around and I can validate whether or not all of those people meet the attributes that are required to get into the data center. So that's in a nutshell what our product portfolio looks like, but in the next sessions, we're going to go into some more details on those products. Now, last question for you, Brian. If you look at, we've been talking about attribute-based access control here. How important should this be to the people that listen into this webinar? Well, how important is it compared to other things that they may be considering?
Yeah, great question, Bart. So I think, you know, zero trust in IT space has been incredibly important over the last, let's just say, 5 years. And I liken attribute-based access control to zero trust. Never trust, never assume, always verify is the basic concept of zero trust. It's very similar with attribute-based access control. So things like, should somebody be allowed into your office when your travel system says that they're, 20,000 miles away in another country, is an attribute that should be considered in opening that door, which is fundamentally what a PACS does. Should somebody be allowed into the data center who doesn't have their ISO 27001 training? Yes or no? So if you care about the safety of your people, where your people are, and the ability to prove compliance, not only to yourself, but to any auditors, then yeah, attribute-based access control and the products that we offer are very important.
Thank you. Our next section will be a demonstration of RightCrowd Access Analytics, presented by Alicia Wheatley, Senior Product Manager. Take it away, Alicia.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm Alicia Wheatley from RightCrowd, and my background is as a business analyst and project manager. I've worked around the world for companies, helping them to better understand their processes, streamline and automate their policies and processes and technologies. I was excited to join RightCrowd and see that for the last 18 years, they've been working with complex solutions like physical access control systems, and they're using logical access in order to define whether or not a person should have physical access to a building or not. I was really excited to see that, over that time, they identified that sometimes systems aren't made to be connected into, and it can be quite complex. So they wanted a different way, a new way of bringing in logical data quickly and efficiently, and that is why we introduced Access Analytics. So today I'm going to take you through the journey here of Access Analytics. It's obviously built on the fact that companies change regularly. We often have, in an example of a company of 25,000 people, we have approximately 2,000 are exiting the company, 2,500 are backfilling those. We've got people changing roles and locations throughout the organization regularly. And of course, there's always acquisitions and sell-offs happening, especially these days post-pandemic, where things are changing quite rapidly. So with all that movement and change and companies organically moving around and changing, we've estimated that it's approximately 25% of the workforce that change. Now, keeping track of that is difficult, and if only 1% of that 25% were bad actors, that's 70 people every year that continue to have inappropriate access. So we've coined that access chaos, and it really is easy to resonate with when you've worked in that space before. Keeping track of who has what access to which assets and systems is really difficult. So what we've done with Access Analytics is we have built a product that sits over the top of your existing solutions. So if you have one or multiple Active Directory instances, or if you're also running Azure, for example, gaining visibility of each of those solutions individually can be difficult unless you have a solution that can map those assets and access together. You may have one or more HR systems, and your contractors may be managed in a separate system altogether, or even in a spreadsheet or an Active Directory. So having a single list of all of your people is really difficult. And often it's the first step to identifying who has access to your assets and systems. So multiple Active Directories, multiple HR systems. Perhaps you've got learning management requirements where certain people have to have completed certain competencies or have licenses. So those types of things can also be tricky to manage and keep an eye on. And of course, ERPs, we've got physical access control systems, operational technologies, things that are identity and access management solutions. So these things are all built to sort of stand in isolation from one another. And that actually makes it very difficult to make good, solid business decisions. So with RightCrowd Access Analytics, it sits over the top. It's very lightweight. It uses extracts from each of these systems rather than depending on deep integrations. And what it does is these three screens, as you can see on my screen here, so these three boxes, we go through a process called map, measure, and monitor. The first stage, and I'll take you through that in a real live demo very shortly, but the first stage is about when we collect the data, every day it remaps those entities from each system every day, and it uses a graph database and RightCrowd's patented technology to be able to do that. So it's taking entities from each of your systems and it's mapping those relationships together virtually, so that rather than having to build those deep integrations, we can create virtual connections between the data in each of those systems. The next slide is measure. So once you've got the data, now you want to be able to check those policies. Make sure that if there are people that have left the business and they still have active access in those assets, you want to be able to measure who they are and how many there are and be able to take action every day. And the last section is monitor. Now, audits is something that we've all become quite familiar with recently. Compliance standards and the industries are all asking us to review access at least annually, sometimes most often quarterly as well. Now, doing that is difficult when you don't have a consolidated view of this cross-system context. So monitor is all about bringing that information together in a really user-friendly way for our business managers, our system owners, our support teams, so that they can see who has the access and not just from the source system itself, but also information from those people systems like HR and contractor management. Know who they are and what levels of access they hold, even what certifications or what other systems they might be connected to, all in a single view, so they have the appropriate amount of information to make a good business decision. So I'm going to jump into the demonstration now. I'll just escape from here. Great. So with Access Analytics, we land you here on the search page. And the reason that we do that is quite simple. If there were an issue that you needed to follow up, you'd actually receive a notification and you'd click through right to the result of that issue. So from the search screen here, you'd be coming here to actually look into a person's access. Now, in this case, because we're bringing all that information from the different systems into a single space, we're able to show you right on the search screen all of your people and the systems. So again, this particular instance has got Workday and SuccessFactors, and it also has SAP Fieldglass, so for their contractors. So we can see not only the people, we can also see the systems, and we can also see the type of employee that they might be, whether they're a contractor or whether they're an employee full-time, whatever it might be that it's fully configurable by your organization. And of course, their status, are they still employed or not? So right from the get-go, you've got an immediate list. These are all my people, and they're sourced from things like HR systems or Active Directory, or even Excel spreadsheets is fine. So we're here to help you use your existing tools and have immediate visibility of who your who is. Now, of course, I might be looking for a particular person here. We're defaulting to show you just their person record, but I can easily toggle that off and I immediately can see this is all of the access that Adrian holds right here in one screen, making offboarding and onboarding much easier. So here I have Adrian's accounts, the systems that Adrian is connected to, and the type of access that Adrian holds in each of those systems. Now, this is how people like to view this information, but we're here working with a graph database, so I'm going to show you how the system uses it. So it puts Adrian here in the center of the graph, and we can still see that same information. So here's Adrian's Wells Fargo record. Here is Adrian's ERP, his Active Directory, and I could go on here, learning management. And because we're not just collecting that he has an account in that system, we're also collecting information about the level of access that he holds. I can expand that graph and see much greater information about Adrian's access. So we still have Adrian here in the center. Here's his learning management record. Here's the ISO 27001 course that he holds. Now let's imagine that because you're an ISO 27001 compliant organization, that you have a dependency that in order to access let's say the production floor, Adrian has to have completed his ISO 27001 training. So because we're collecting all this information, we're now able to reverse the graph and be able to write rules about to show whether people are compliant or not compliant. So in this case, show me all the people that have access to the production floor that have not completed their ISO 27001 training. And again, we're collecting information about each of the properties within each of those systems as well. So we can see even when Adrian's training was completed, perhaps we could have an expiry date in there as well and report on any of the properties from any of these systems. And it does it for us daily. So it's unlike those systems that do a one-time check for you. You have a daily check, building a discipline within your organization, helping you to support your existing processes and technologies and have better information earlier. So of course, you're probably not going to want to traverse to every single person every single day. Of course, we've moved from this map it section of the demonstration. I'll now show you the measure it portion. Now, the most simple report that comes out of the box from day one is show me all of the people who have left the organization but continue to have active access to their assets. And we do that in a nice and easy dashboard here, which shows a lovely trend line so you can see your trend toward compliance. We click through to see the specific results. And I have them ordered by system, but our HR team and a lot of our customers choose to actually order it by person. So when a person leaves, you've got a nice offboarding list for each of them. But in this case, my system admins prefer to receive it by the system that they're accountable for. So in Active Directory, we currently have 10 employees that have left the organization that continue to have active employee accounts in Active Directory. And we're not only seeing their information from AD here, we're also seeing information from HR. So relevant around their position title is often helpful when making a decision, who they reported to, making it easier to follow up whether that access should continue or not. Their status, obviously, knowing that they're terminated or active is important. Any other relevant information, and you, the customer, can actually configure which data you're seeing on these reports, making it really intuitive and in alignment with your existing business processes. So, looking through, let's say Wells Fargo, for example, we have got 3 people that have access to our Wells Fargo accounts. Again, the Wells Fargo account information is often, or any separate account information is often not super intuitive. It's usually just a username, but using Access Analytics, connecting data together virtually means that I can also show information from HR in here as well, making the follow-up much quicker and intuitive for my teams. So that's the most sort of basic report that comes out of the box, of course, too. And all of these are fully configurable by our customers, making it, ensuring that they are able to feel empowered by using their data in a new and exciting way. So here is another dashboard focused on our physical access control compliance standards. So here from day one, again, if you're bringing on your physical access control system, Access Analytics can say, these are all of your card holders that have that are connected to HR. And where they're located perhaps can be really helpful if you're a company that has got multiple locations. Knowing where your people are located and what physical access they hold is really handy. And again, other information from HR like who they're reporting to, and maybe even information from the physical access control system that is often hard to get a hold of, like which card or fob or badge they're holding, all again in the same screen. You also, by default, gain access to who the non-compliant people are. So who are the people that shouldn't have access? They're no longer, or like they don't map to my HR or my AD lists. And again, with context that is required to be able to make those calls. Some of the other things are around, like we talked a little around the training requirements here. So in order to have access to the data center, they must have completed their ISO 27001 training. Every day I'm getting a list of these are the people whose training has expired or is incomplete and need to complete that training in order to retain that access to the data center. And of course, not only do you review the item here, but you're also able to select an action. So perhaps the access should be removed, or perhaps it's a note around context around why that person's training isn't completed. So in this case, it's a new starter. We can expand to see comments. We can see that training has been scheduled. So we don't need to go back through and contact that person again. We can see that it's been handled and we can move on with our job. Last stage is around auditing. So one of the key requirements, I'll use ISO 27001 as an example because we've been talking about it throughout this session, is monitoring access to your high-risk assets. Now, over time, we've built these silos between our security teams, our IT teams, HR, and business. And when compliance structures like ISO 27001 are put in place, it means that those teams need to start sharing information. And that becomes really difficult because each of those systems are often not built to talk to one another. Access Analytics building those virtual connections across those pillars means that you have that daily visibility of information that is important to be able to meet those compliance standards. So in this case, we're talking about high-risk access to the data center. So every quarter, a company is required to list who has access to the data center. And again, with Access Analytics, you're not just seeing names on a page, you're actually gaining context, like their name from the HR system and their employee status, perhaps their card number, when they were last seen on site, whether they've left the company, what their termination date was. This is information that you don't typically get from a single application. So Access Analytics helps to bring that together for your people. Their position title, their location, and again, you can add an action, you can add comments and be able to provide full context to that data. Now, of course, rather than having to share this view with your end users or your business managers or your system admins, whoever it might be, even audit facilitators, you now have the ability to click this Create Audit button and it will generate a nice user interface of that same report. So they'll get a message that says, hello, please review the list and advise if access should continue. So this is that same information presented in a nice user-friendly way. People are able to go through and, again, see not only the name, but there's information from HR that is very difficult for our end users to gain access to. Just when making calls about access, things like that are highly important, obviously. They can filter on these, making it easy to make sure that they're responding quickly and efficiently. And then once this review is complete, I'd click Save and Sign. And this feedback and any comments that I've added, I'll just open up this one here, any comments that have been added will then be transferred back to that main report that we were looking at before, closing the loop on that review, making sure that inappropriate access has been reviewed and has been actioned in a much more efficient way. Now, keep in mind, that is the quarterly report check the box process that we're all being forced to do. But because you're doing this review every day, it means that that final report is much easier because you've been cleaning as you go. So that's, I'm just going to jump back to my presentation now. So sort of to fly back through it, we have the search screen, which pulls together all of your people and their data and connects it together. So we have our map measure, allowing you to have daily visibility of your compliance and what needs to happen. And of course, the trends, so you can go back in time if you need to review who had that access on that past date. And then finally, of course, the audits. So being able to more easily report and collaborate for your report responses, allowing you and your teams to make more informed and compliant decisions, so better decisions for your compliance and policy standards. I'm just going to present the last few slides here. So with RightCrowd Access Analytics, you gain the full picture. You're able to identify unauthorized access, and of course, you're able to periodically review access, making your user access reviews faster and ensuring that your business people have the cross-system context that they require to make good business decisions. Back to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Our next section is also product demonstrations. These are called RightCrowd Workforce Access and Visitor Management. I'd like to welcome Nathan White, Senior Product Manager for this session. Nathan, you have the floor.
Hi, I'm Nathan, the Product Manager for Workforce Access here at RightCrowd. Today we are going to go through a high-level view of attribute-based access control and how this helps enterprises maintain control. RightCrowd Workforce Access solves a variety of PIM solutions for enterprises across all industries by getting the most out of your physical access control system. Basically, we give a brain to the Tin Man. We integrate with HR, learning management systems, directories, and more to combine with your business processes to get a profile of what your cardholder access looks like. Using Workforce Access allows you to keep people's access up to date without the need for manual intervention, really enacting core zero trust principles for your physical security. Employee onboard and change of role becomes easier with attribute-based access control. Determine to activate or deactivate access by HR status, training, fatigue management, and more. Suddenly, a role change doesn't require a message to security to change a cardholder's access. If a contractor does not have the necessary training, access can be revoked the moment they do. The automated process will provision it. RightCrowd Enterprise Visitor Management leverages the integrations and automations of Workforce Access to provide the most powerful visitor management platform to meet your requirements. Enforce your business processes onto your visitors to ensure a safe, secure, and compliant site. Use a combination of complete visitor registration with approval or an integration to register your visitors. Provide physical and logical access to have a complete story to make the experience of your visitors as worry-free as possible. Right now, I'm going to demo one of those integrations, which is our Exchange integration. For those integrations, we look at our RightCrowd product, and what we're going to do is look at the meeting invites for Outlook and bring them in. We're going to do two things with that information. One, we're going to look at the visitor and add any outside email addresses as a visit to RightCrowd. And for people who are internal to the system or to the enterprise, we're actually going to provision their access so they have access to that room when they need it. So coming over to our Outlook, what I'm first going to do is create a new event. I'm going to call this customer review, and I'm going to select this as my boardroom 1. My attendees are going to be me, and I'm also going to add somebody else to the invite. So this is my visitor and this is my internal person. I set up the date to be 9 a.m. and what we're really going to see is they're only going to have access for that time period. I'm going to send that. And while that's sending and in the background the process is happening, I'll show you how we would actually set that up. So we come into our area management, we look at our access levels, and we can see that we have boardroom 1 here. Any meeting rooms that you have, you just simply add to this list of meetings room here, and that will automatically get picked up. That means if you have certain meeting rooms that don't require access or you don't want to be part of the sync, you just exclude them from this list. It is an inclusive list. So that should have happened by now. So if I come back and I have a look at my visitor management screen, it's not there yet because I've actually set it for tomorrow. I look at this, I click apply, and now we can see my record has come up. We can see that it's boardroom 1 and my expected due date is the 5th of October at 9 a.m. If I were to click enter, I can now enter this person to say that they have arrived. We see here, and we've got this Wi-Fi and this parking required. These are additional attributes that we can set at the time of entering the visit to say, does this person need Wi-Fi access? If they do, in the background, we integrate with the Wi-Fi system. We send, please give us a username and password temporarily, and we'll forward that as an email to the visitor. Down here, we can select a badge if they require one. And this will actually push to the physical access control system to give that person a physical badge that they can use at the swipe readers and only for that time. As you can see, the visit is only for the time of the meeting that came in and on the system. If I click next, in this case, in order for this person to come on site, they must complete their safety induction. In this case, we see that they've visually done it on a piece of paper. They might have done it beforehand. They might have done it in the learning management system. But whatever it is, it's ticked here and we can just click enter. As we can see here, the person is now entered and they're ready to come on site. Their host, in this case, Darren Bain, will get notified and that this visitor is here and they can come collect them. But that's one half of the story. The other half was the actual card holder themselves. And if we look at the card holder, it was our Sean McGrath, whoops. And we can have a look at his access levels and we can see that access has been provided to him, but in this case, he has a little bit of a buffer window. So it's 15 minutes before and it's 15 minutes after. So we can see with RightCrowd, we can set up integrations and we can actually really make access smart for different people. He only needs boardroom access for the length of the visit, so that's all he gets. Thank you. This concludes the demonstration.
Thank you, Nathan. Our next section is also product demonstration, this time for RightCrowd Presence Control. I'll bring back Bart Van Sevenant, Chief Product Officer, for a second round. Bart, you have the floor.
Hello again. In this next section, I'm going to provide you with an overview of RightCrowd Presence Control. Now, with this product, we have introduced a very innovative new way of helping to secure and make the workplace a safer place than it is today. With this product, what we're doing is we're extending and reinforcing existing physical access control. And what we do with this is add additional applications in the context of safety, security, health, compliance, and the like that are impossible with traditional access control. Now, let's make this a bit more specific. You're probably familiar with these things here, access badges. Access badges have been in use for a long time, and those access badges are what we like to call passive credentials. They don't do anything unless you hold them in the field, the magnetic field of a door reader. Now, what we're going to do here is using this security wearable, which is part of the presence control product line of RightCrowd. And what I'm going to demonstrate in a second here is we're going to take that existing passive credential, the existing access badge, and we're going to slide it into this device. As soon as I will do that, two things are going to happen. The first thing is that this device, this wearable, is going to read out this card. After having read it, it now knows who this device belongs to. So as soon as the card has been inserted, it knows, hey, I'm sort of representing Bart. I'm the digital identity equivalent for Bart. The second thing that is going to happen is that this device is now going to be able to, in a secure way, communicate with the backend software. And in that backend, we are going to run through what we explained earlier on, our attribute-based physical access control system. We're going to validate, have all of the conditions that are required to be present in this particular location, have they been met, yes or no? And that may be checking my identity, checking whether I'm allowed to be in today, checking whether I went through certain trainings and the like. If that all went well, if those conditions have been met, then this device is going to visually show that I'm authorized to be here. And you'll see that in the demo in a second. If those conditions have not been met, then this device is going to give a very clear visual indication of that as well. So let's go into a quick demonstration of that. So I'm going to take my existing access badge, and I'm going to slide it into this badge holder. I'm simply going to push the button in the device. And what is happening now is in the background, we have first on the identity check, knows who I am, and it has checked all of these attributes. You can see here that the attributes have been met, so it's showing a green light. Now, if I quickly simulate here in the background that one of the conditions would not have been met, so let's say that I'm missing a particular training to go into this particular location, you will see what is happening. The device is now blinking red, indicating that I'm not allowed or not supposed to be here. I'm going to change that attribute back so we don't keep blinking all the time. Good, so that's a quick demonstration, and this is just one of many use cases for this technology. What I just demonstrated to you is what we refer to as visual authorization. It's literally that visual validation that I'm allowed to be present in this particular location. And just think about what we did. We have solved a problem that is well known in the physical security space called tailgating. One person entering, others following in, and once you're inside a certain room, you're not really sure whether people are actually authorized to be here. With this visual authorization, we literally have that visual check, that proof that people are actually allowed to be here. Now, briefly, a couple of other use cases, because as I mentioned, these devices really improve the safety, security, compliance in organizations. So I'm going to give you a few other examples of things that you can do with RightCrowd Presence Control with these security wearables. A second interesting example, one we launched recently, is visitor tethering. Now, what is that? What does that mean? A lot of organizations have policies in place that say when visitors come to see us, they need to stay with the host, a host escort visitor policy. With these devices, you can literally enforce that. So when a host comes down to pick up his or her visitors, we can virtually link those visitors to the host. And if throughout the visit, one or more visitors would go too far away from the host, then the device from the host is going to start indicating that using a red blinking light. And the same will happen on the badge holder of that visitor. Will blink red so that people see that the visitor is no longer with their host. And of course, we also have an audit trail of everything that just happened. Those devices also provide what we refer to as presence reporting. So you will know at any point in time who was in the building. And if you have more infrastructure out in your building, you will know by floor or by area within the building, how many people, who is in those particular areas. The solution can also be used to really automate evacuation management, very important from a safety perspective for many organizations. Evacuation management in a lot of cases happens in a highly manual way. People have these printed out lists with all of the employees of the company, and when the evacuation alarm goes off, you go to a mustering point and you start to sort of manually check the boxes of people that have been sort of arriving at the muster point. But the big problem with that solution is you do not know who was actually in the building, so who is still missing. When you use these types of security wearables that are part of RightCrowd Presence Control, we automate this whole process and make it much more efficient. When you hit that alert button, like evacuate the building, at that point, we're going to take a snapshot and we will know who was actually in the building at the start of the evacuation. When people then arrive at one or more mustering points, it will automatically be checked in and you will be able to follow along in real time who arrived at which muster point, and most importantly, who has not arrived and when and where have we last seen these people in the building. So very innovative, strong way of making evacuation management more effective. And the last example I briefly want to touch on is contact tracing. We have gone through a long pandemic. The pandemic is not over yet. And with these same devices, so again, same platform, same devices, you can also do contact tracing. So when you enable this service in RightCrowd Presence Control, these devices will continually monitor other badge holders, other wearables, and when they come too close within a 6 feet or 2 meter distance, it will record that, will register that information, and then later on offload it to our platform so that if someone would be reporting being infected with COVID-19, that you will know exactly who has been too close to that person, for how long, when did that happen, and the like. So that's a quick overview of RightCrowd Presence Control. A lot of applications that really improve physical security, improve safety, and a layer that you can simply put on top of your existing access control.
Okay, thank you, Bart. Okay, we do have a little time for questions, and I see that some have already come in. As I mentioned at the start, if you have questions for the presenters, please enter them in the GoToWebinar control box under the Questions tab. We may not have time to answer all of them now, but all of the questions will be sent to RightCrowd, and the right folks will follow up with you. See what I did there. Okay, there are a couple of good questions in. Let's begin with this one here for the folks on the team. It's great that the secret is out. Why were you a secret in the first place? And then the question is it because companies didn't understand that they had this problem, or that you were available to solve it?
Thanks, Kevin. It's Peter. I'll take that one for you. Just want to check you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, that's a really good question. I think the short answer is customers have always known the issue is there. The difficulty is determining how to actually solve those particular problems. So we've obviously been working in this space for the last 18 years and have a variety of technologies that really address these particular issues. BMAC, would you like to add some further color to that one?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me, Kevin?
Yes.
So if we take the question, why were we a secret? I think it's pretty plain. When access management is mission critical, it's not like the companies that use our software hang our RightCrowd sign on their front lawn. They don't, hey, RightCrowd is doing our access management. So we're kind of this behind the scenes system that controls a mission critical function for a company, but nobody really knows who's doing it. Even with the access card, I mean, we are setting the attributes and the access of the card for the person, but the card doesn't say RightCrowd on it. No one knows who we are, what we're doing behind the scenes, and we're doing it for like 3 of the top 5 companies in the world use our system, but they don't hang it on their front door and say, hey, look who does this for us. So I think that's why we are we are a secret. It's just we're not a real forward-facing company that people know what we're doing behind the scenes, and it's very mission critical. So, you know, we wish we could have some of these companies put a RightCrowd sign on the front door, but they don't. But in saying that, the problem's been around a long time. Like Peter said, we've been doing this for almost 20 years. It's not like it's a new problem we're solving. We've been doing this for a long time. The problem has always been there, and we've been solving it a long time. It's just, you know, one of those companies that no one really knows about, but should.
It should. Okay, thank you. Here's a great question that came in as well from the audience that said, you know, you were mentioning quite a few integrations and interfacing with information from other systems, including HR, learning management, and so forth. Now, are those specific systems that a company has to have for that to work, or is it more agnostic and able to work with a broad variety of those systems?
Hey, this is Bart. I'll take that question. So the platform that we developed is a fairly open platform. So we assume that we need information in the context of those attributes that we've spoken about extensively. We assume that we need information from different sources, from an HR system, but there's of course many out there, from something like Active Directory, from contractor management, but again, there's multiple contractor management systems. So our platform has been set up in a way that we can very quickly sort of pull data in from a variety of sources. So it's not so that we only support that particular HR system or that particular ERP system. It's a really open framework. We're able to pull data in a very flexible way. And then from there, we push information back down in the physical access control system. That integration, which we call southbound into the physical access control system, that one is a much more tight integration because it goes in both directions. But so back to the question that this person asked, yes, we can easily integrate into a variety of different systems.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks. Here's one about one of those systems. I guess there are a couple of questions actually about hybrid workspaces, but I think this encapsulates it. PACS systems, I guess, physical access control systems. PACS seems to be out of step with hybrid workplaces. Now, is your approach with attribute access management, I guess that's attribute-based access management, is that a more secure solution for these kind of work arrangements?
I'll take that as well, Kevin. I believe it is. And if you just take a step back, up until like prior to the pandemic, a lot of organizations had all of their employees or contractors come in on a daily basis. And in that context, you could think like, well, it's sort of normal that a given person that comes to work every single day, that their access card, their badge simply works, like they're allowed to come in. But if you look at the hybrid sort of working situation that we have today, you can ask the question like, is it really needed that the access is turned on for everyone at any time? And the right answer probably is no from a risk perspective. And that's where attribute-based access management comes into play. You can have something like, and many organizations use something like that, where if as an employee you have, for example, an online portal to say, I'm going to request access to come to the office tomorrow. So you request it. It can be automatically approved or approved by your manager. But that request and that approval can then trigger the access badge of that particular person to be enabled tomorrow. So when I go to the office tomorrow, my badge will work. But if I don't file that request and I would try to get into that office, I would not be allowed because the badge would not work at that point in time. So that is what attribute-based access management allows you to do. And I think by definition, that is more secure than not doing that.
Than not doing that. Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Here's an interesting one. Does your offering combat insider threats and security breaches?
Hey, this is BMAC. I'll take that one. Do we combat it, insider threat? So if you take the term combat, I guess you're talking things you have to do with any kind of threat. So insider threat being a risk. in combating it, first thing you have to do is identify a risk, and that's one thing we do very clearly. So if you take the Access Analytics platform, that is a risk identifier. We look for people that should not have access that still do, outliers, things like that. So we identify the potential risk. And after that, you'd be looking, once you identify a risk, how do you action it? So with Access Analytics, we would identify we have an outlier person. We would then action that risk for to be taken care of. So I think in combating it, in steps one is identifying the risk, which we do, and then actioning the risk, which we do. But then if you look at risk or insider threat from a preventative side, so risk prevention, how do you prevent that risk from happening? That's what Workforce Access does from the very beginning. And attribute-based access management is to prevent any risks from happening. That's the whole point of access control and access management from the beginning, is to keep people out, kind of what Brian Jones said. It's the lock that is keeping people out of our spaces. And what RightCrowd does is to make sure everyone on site is right. So we are managing the risk. So yeah, Kevin, I would say we do combat it, combat being a very specific term. So we identify it, we manage it, we map it, we action it, we prevent it kind of across the board with the whole scope in the end, make sure everyone on site is right, contractors, employees, visitors. So that controls and combats your insider threat. So I don't know if anyone else has any comments on that one.
That sounded great. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, let's see. There got a couple of questions I think are follow-ups on the product capabilities. One of them had to do with visitor management, and the question there is that something that is with your current clients, is that enabled for anyone in the organization can request or trigger visitors, or is that handled by a manager or an administrator of some kind?
Yeah, I'll take that question. That really comes down to the preference or the policies within an organization. All options are possible with our solution. So if you have a policy that says anyone in my organization can invite external visitors to come to the organization, then through a portal interface, they can file those requests. In more traditional organization, we still have a few of those in our customer base. You may limit that, and you may say, for example, the administrative assistant for each of the departments is the person that is taking care of visits, and in that model, we only allow those people to do those sort of invites of external visitors. So it's really down to the policy that an organization wants, but the system itself allows any of those options.
Okay, so that would be one of the customizations you would arrange with a particular customer on install.
Yeah, correct.
Right. Okay. All right. And here's another one. You mentioned, actually, I think, Bart, this is for you, that you were mentioning the evacuation or mustering function. And the question there is, what pane of glass is that person looking at? Would they run out with I guess with a laptop or with a tablet, or and which system are they actually looking at in that event? Yeah,
no, very good question. So the actual device you would be using is indeed a tablet, an iPad, something like that, or a portable. You are logged onto the presence control dashboard in that specific example. And within that dashboard, you have the evacuation screen. And what you will see in the screen is very simple. You will see by mustering area who has been checked on, and that is like a live view. So as people arrive at that mustering site, you will see more and more sort of people being added. And then probably more important is the inverse view. You can say, we took that, as I explained, you take a snapshot at the time that the evacuation starts. So in the other view, you will see how many people, the people that have not arrived at one of the mustering areas yet. I want to see that list, and in that view, you will also see when and where have they last been seen. So you may have a list. Imagine there's 9 people that have not arrived at the mustering area yet, and I can see for each 9 of them, this person, for example, was last seen 2 minutes ago on the 5th floor in my building, and that is very helpful for first responder teams that may come on site.
Okay, I see. Thank you. I think we have time for one more. Let's do this one because zero trust was mentioned a couple of times, I think, during the presentations. And this person says, zero trust is still a fairly new idea for my clients. How do you convince physical security teams to adopt or consider a zero trust approach?
I'll take that as well, Kevin, and this is a super great question. So zero trust, very briefly, comes from the cyber side. So indeed, it is a new concept in physical security. And a lot of times clients don't really know like what is that really all about. But the very, very simple pragmatic way to understand it is, imagine that you walk up to the building and you drop your access badge. Your card falls onto the ground. If someone else picks up that card, they go to your front door, they badge, they can simply walk in and literally pretend to be you because they picked up your card. And that sort of illustrates what zero trust is all about. Zero trust is basically saying no access is granted at any point in time. So if I would find that same badge on the ground, I would try to go to that front door, it would not work. So zero trust assumes that before you grant access, you're going to validate the identity and the authorization levels. In general, I think that if you are still in a traditional physical access control model whereby you've predefined access in a very static way, making the jump to zero trust is a very big step. It's like literally from one extreme to the other. So in general, we recommend customers to say, do this in a phased approach and first look at attribute-based access control, where at the minimum, if certain attributes are not met, that at that point you revoke the access. Once you've sort of acquainted yourself with that and you've rolled that out in your organization, then you may say for certain very highly sensitive, high secure areas, for those I'm actually going to imply or enforce true zero trust, which means at a given point in time, no one has access, for example, to the data center. And if you want to get in, you're going to have to go through a couple of steps. And then on the fly, access will be granted for a limited amount of time. After that, the access is revoked again. So that's the true implementation of zero trust, but it's a big sort of step from where most organizations are today. So for us, it's like a typical phased approach to get there.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're out of time at this point, so this is going to end today's session for RightCrowd. I want to thank all the presenters. We had a big cast today, and everyone's presentation was greatly appreciated. Thanks to all of you too for joining us. Please be safe and enjoy the rest of your day.